Shalom from Israel, I'm Ariel Ben Abraham. This week we read Parshat Behar. Our sages debate around this name for this portion of the Torah, saying if Israel is already in Sinai, by Mount Sinai with God, why the Torah tells us that it was in the mountain. It's like we already know that they are there around the mountain, so what's the point? There are many opinions, several opinions about this, and usually, as we have said before, and our sages actually meaning echo or expanding about what our sages say, when the Torah repeats something, it's for a reason. So it's not a redundancy that the Torah is telling us, in the mount, knowing that we already are in the mount. Around the mount in this case. It's like this is the geographical place. That's one of the reasons. Other reasons which are a little deeper, going deeper, is like in the mount is really in the presence of God. It's like being with God. So the portion Parshat Behar is telling us something very important, because it's about the moment in which the Torah is telling us that we are with God, we are in the mount. We have said many times before also that Mount Moriah, the mount where the Temple of Jerusalem is, and Mount Sinai, in some way they have like similar values, similar meanings. We know that God is in a mountain. That's His place for us. It's like the place from which He communicates with us. It's always in a mount. So in the case of the desert, that mount was Mount Sinai, Behar, in the mount. And in Eretz Israel, while living in the Promised Land, that mount is Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount. So when the Torah is telling us that it's in the mount, it's like in our permanent connection or permanent awareness of our connection with God. So there's a deeper meaning. Yes, we are connected with God, but in this case, it's like being fully aware of that. In other words, we have a material reality that we have to deal with. That's evident. But at the same time, we're connected to a superior reality, which is God. All the time. So to speak, we have like one foot in the mount, in this connection, and the other foot is in the material world. It's not a matter of being separated, but actually it's being connected. It's like a link. So it's like we are not entirely in the material world. We are not entirely in the spiritual world. We are in both at the same time. And the idea is to complement them. It's like we complement the material reality by bringing the Spirit, God's Spirit, into it. So we have to infuse the material world with God's presence. That's the purpose and the destiny and the identity of Israel. That's our job here. And again, we have to translate the divine presence in the world as the goodness that God wants to make prevail in the material world. So anything that is not good, we have to remove. We have to reorient, we have to correct in order to make goodness prevail. So this is the meaning of this interaction of matter and spirit. So the idea is to infuse spirituality, to infuse the goodness of the Spirit of God in the material world. And by this, we're talking about all levels of consciousness also, not just the tangible material world, like the land, the trees, nature, but also inside of us, in our consciousness. We have said that we have several levels and dimensions in consciousness. We have discernment, we have intellect, we have mind, we have thought, we have feelings, we have emotions, we have passions, which we have said is the intensity with which we experience emotions and feelings. And also we have instincts. And to those dimensions we add others that we call common sense, subconscious mind, and unconscious mind. Everything is connected. So we have different dimensions and levels in consciousness that we have to infuse with the Spirit of God, which are already waiting to be filled with this goodness that we have mentioned before. Then we manifest, fully manifest, God's presence in ourselves and in the world. That's the whole point. And we have to understand what that is. It's like goodness, yes, but what is it? Then we have to study Torah, we have to study the Talmud and all the ethics, the laws, the ordinances, the decrees that define for us what goodness means. Let's never forget that wicked people, evil people, they believe in their own way what goodness is. And sometimes this goodness is doing evil to others. That's not goodness. So the totalitarian mentality, ideology, for instance, is one perfect, so to speak, case. There are people who want to impose their truth, what they believe is good for them, over others, on others. But it's not truth, and it's not goodness. It's humiliation, exploitation, subjugation, and everything that denies the dignity of human life. Then we have to stop them and tell them that's not the way it is. That's not the way goodness is. And we have to be aware of that. This is very, very important because nowadays, in the last, actually throughout history, especially now in our times, we see that in other cultures, in other religions, in other ideologies. And what people are doing now, these international organizations, they say, no, these people in this culture with this particular ideology or with this particular religion, they're not bad. Yeah, but they are stoning homosexuals, they are burning women's faces, they are sexual abusing children, minors, among other things, they're slaving people. And these international organizations say, well, that's cultural diversity. Really? They do that. And they sit these nations in their organizations about human rights and those kind of things. And we say, how is this possible? And then they also sit people in their organizations that have to do with education and culture. And they sit people there who teach in their countries to kill other people, to hate other people. It's like, how is that possible? You say, well, that's cultural diversity. No, it isn't cultural diversity. That's evil. Then we have to stand and voice our concern about that. And say, no, this is not good. This is evil. This goes against human dignity. This goes against life. This goes against goodness. This is essential. Now, we may not be politicians, we may not be philosophers, we may not be leaders to start a fight and a war against them. But we have the obligation to call the attention, at least in our immediate surroundings, our immediate reality, family, community, city, country, about that. Because one day, if we don't do anything, if we don't say anything, these things that we don't consider good are going to take over our homes, our countries, our communities. So just wake up and do something about that. And the way to do that is actually to start within us in our own individual consciousness. So what is this part in my awareness, in my consciousness, that want to profit, that want to benefit, that want to take at the expense and detriment of other people? Is that right? Even with ourselves, not just necessarily with our immediate environment. It's like, what are we taking from ourselves against ourselves? Is it good to be angry? Is it good to be depressed? Is it good to be upset? Is it good to be haughty? Is it good to experience envy, indifference, lust? So we have to ask those questions. It's like, okay, we don't want other cultures to oppress and exploit people. So we're doing that with ourselves. Maybe we are. Maybe we do. Are we treating ourselves with dignity? What people call now self-esteem. So we have to pay attention to that. Should we leave room for negative tendencies and negative states in our own consciousness and make them an addiction? I like to be angry. I like to be depressed. There's nothing wrong with that. And we have to start really with ourselves. But after we do our own inventory, then we have to go outside to see the major inventory that we have to make around. That is really right, the kind of society, the kind of government, the kind of constitution that I have in my society, in my country. Is that right? Is that good? Is it for the individual and collective goodness? Really? And then we act accordingly. So, the idea of this portion, Behar, is to make us aware of whatever this portion is telling us. We're going to go there now. Had to do with a profound aspect of our connection with God. It's in the mountain. It's with God. So you say we have to pay attention to what is said when God is telling us, do this in the mountain. Or in the mountain, I command you to do this. So it's very interesting because with this preamble, we're going to understand really, we're going to grasp what he's saying, the first commandment coming from here. He said, when you come into the land that I give you, talking about the promised land, again, we have to repeat over and over again that every concept that we read from the Torah has meanings, deeper meanings, not just the literal meaning, okay, it's a land, it's a piece of land in the Middle East, yes. But at the same time, there's a deeper meaning, talking about the good life, the life that is good, the goodness in life. That's the promised land. That's the land that God is giving us to live in and for, to live by. We're talking about the goodness that we have been saying, we have been talking about before. That I will give you, the land shall observe, keep, a Shabbat, Sabbath, rest for Hashem, for God. So it's like the goodness that God is giving us have to take a rest every 6 years. So the 7-year rests. We have said that this is similar in our blog, God's Love. If you read the commentaries that we have made on this portion, that refers to the 7th year and the 50th year, we mentioned that this a common denominator here, which is Shabbat, the Sabbath. So in the same way that there are 6 days of the week that we work, there's a 7th day of rest. Every 6 days we do that. Now, likewise, there's a 7th year. And then there's a 7 periods of 7 years, for a total of 49. And we get to another big one, called the Jubilee, Yovel. And again, we're talking about here about something deeper than 1 day, deeper than 1 year, and deeper than 50 years. And God is telling us that in this connection. It's like we're connected with God at this moment. God is telling us you have to rest. The land that I'm giving you, the country that I am giving you, the 7th year, the Shvita. So we have to know. Of course, we're going to get there. It's like, okay, we have 1 day, the Sabbath, 24 hours. And then we don't work in that day, we don't do anything. Same thing is going to happen every 7th year with the land. So, in other words, the idea of the cessation of work is to be with God. To be with God in a different level. Because we may think, it's like, what about the other 6 years? What about the other 6 days? What about the other 49 years? So yeah, we are with God too, as we were saying before. But we're not completely with God. We're not 100%. We're still dealing with the material world. We're working. We're making a living. We have to deal with the material reality. Our basic needs, what matters in life. So then the idea is the 7th day, we cut ties with that material reality in order to enter in the oneness, in the transcending reality that God is. And we enter there. There's no material references there in Shabbat. And everything is provided. In other words, we have food enough for Shabbat night, Shabbat day. We don't have to worry about anything. So the same principle is applied for the 7th year. So the Torah we're going to summarize, tells us that God is going to provide enough food for 3 years for us not to do anything, not to work, not to make the land produce on the 7th year. So he's saying, the 6th year, you're going to plant, you're going to get triple. Not even double like Shabbat, the day. But you're going to have triple. So we're going to have super abundance the 6th year. In order to let the land rest for a year. So this is quite interesting. But we may say, well, those were those times where we were close to God, God was with us all the time. But nothing has changed. He's still with us. We are the ones who have separated from Him. So we have to go back to this agreement, to this connection. So this is not for the past, this is for the present. But let's emphasize in the meaning of the 6 days, 6 years. We talk about the 49 years. The whole idea of the 6 years and the 6 days is to work towards the Shabbat of ourselves, the Shabbat of the land. So in other words, when we work 6 days, it's not that we are separated completely, as we have said before, from God. It's interesting because in Judaism, in the morning prayers, we read the song of the day, the psalm of the day. And literally says today, if it's Sunday, for instance, today is the first day of the week. We say the first day in the Shabbat, Beshabbat. So our sages say it's Sunday. Why do I have to mention the Shabbat? In the Shabbat. It's not just that. It's the day is in the Shabbat. So what is the meaning of that? That every day of the 6 days, we do work within the consciousness of being connected with God, which is Shabbat. That's the meaning of it. So our sages in the Talmud explain, they say, everything we do, the 6 days, have to be done towards the idea of the 7th day. So what is the 7th day? Our permanent connection with God. Total goodness. Then we have to pursue goodness every day. Because goodness is the Shabbat that we are connecting every day in order to get finally to the full Sabbath. That's the meaning. In other words, everything that we do in the material world, it has to be towards that idea that goodness is. This is very, very important. Now, we have said many times, we'll keep saying it, the Talmud, our sages say, that Torah, Shabbat, Israel, and God are one. That's the idea. So it's like, when we're talking about Shabbat, we're talking about God. And what is God? We do not define God, we know that. But then we know what His attributes. He showed us in the Torah His attributes. It's goodness, abundant loving kindness and truth, grace, compassion. It's goodness. Then everything we do in the material world that we were saying before, in this commentary, have to be towards goodness. Because we come from goodness. Goodness is our essence and true identity. And then that's what we infuse in the material world, in our lives. So we pursue goodness as the cause and goodness as the effect. That's the way it works. And then we have the superabundance on Shabbat. Everything is provided. We have the double portion on the Shabbat day. So it's like on Friday in some way. That's what we start saying in the bracha when we consecrate the Shabbat. We say, the sixth day. So the sixth day is the preamble. It's like, the sixth day is like the, so to speak, the reunion of the 6 days is in the sixth day. It's like everything that happened in the 5 previous days led us to this sixth day, which is the preamble, the one that says, okay, this is the abundance that you're going to enjoy the next day, the 7th. So we start consecrating the acknowledging the sixth day. So it's like there's a completed mission, there's a completed task, there's a completed purpose on the sixth day. And then after that completion is realized, this completion is actually the amount, the goodness, the abundance that we're going to enjoy on the 7th day. Likewise, we have 6 years. And it's very interesting because it's about the land that we have saying. So it's about planting. So every year we plant. Now, we have to pay attention to this is because in Judaism, there are years within this 6-year period in which we have to bring tribute, offerings to God. And we have to design several percentages of our production, field production, the produce of the field. We have to give it to the Levites, the priests, the poor people. It's very, very important. So in other words, we work for a purpose. It's not like, okay, I'm going to work, I'm going to make money, and I'm going to get rich. Yes, but you have to share that. And you have to share that with the source that is providing you that abundance. So the source is our connection with God. As we said, it's the temple, the Levites, and the priests. They represent our permanent connection with God. They secure the abundance that God is giving us by our work. Therefore, we have to give back to Him. And we do that by sustaining that connection, which is the temple and the priests and the Levites, and also the poor people. That's very important. It's essential. So there's a purpose in life when we make life produce. And it's about goodness. It's not about necessarily richness. It's about goodness. That's what we're supposed to make prevail. That's the whole purpose of it. Now, this whole idea is around community. It's around the people. So later in the portion, we're going to read about the people who serve us, if we have servants, if we have slaves, and then how this relationship that we have with them changes in the 7th year and in the 50th year. So again, we understand that all these laws about the cessation of work in a 7-year period and a 49-year period had to do with freedom, had to do with achieving a state of consciousness in which we are with God completely. That's the 7th year, and that's the 50th year. Now, the 50th year, the Yovel, the Jubilee, is even deeper. Because we're talking about 7 periods of 7 years in order to get to one in which total freedom is experienced. Everything is released. The slaves, the servants, everything. Everybody returns to his ancestral heritage. That's what the word that is used here. It's like he will get back to his ancestral heritage. It's like whatever we lost after God gave us, that we need to recover by working, by serving those who can provide for us. This is a period, this is a process in which we achieve finally, we regain what we have lost. So in this case, we have to understand that the people who we serve, and there's a provision here, it's not going to be overloaded, it's going to be exploited. There's a commandment, a specific commandment about that. We'll serve you, but that doesn't mean that you're going to slave him, the person who is going to serve. So in this context that we have said in the blog, it's about empowering people. It's like once we lost our original inheritance, the goodness that we get. We lost it at some point in life. We get alienated by consumer society. We get alienated by others. We lost it on the way. We have to get it back. We have to work for it. And we have to work for those qualities, in this case, not people, that can get us back our original essence, our original ancestral heritage that God gave us. The goodness we are. That's the way we work for it. So now, in a practical way, like in a literal sense, we serve these guys who have abundance, who have richness, to help us get back our own richness. So they could be our teachers. They could be our bosses, they're helping us provide for us. But again, let's go deeper in that sense and try to understand that these people that we serve, in order to regain our original ancestral heritage, our essence and true identity, are those good qualities that we have forsaken, that we have forgotten, that we put aside at some point in life. That we have to work. Sometimes it takes 6 years. Sometimes it takes 49 years. But God is telling us, this is a promise of redemption. If you do the right thing. There's a promise of total freedom in God. Let's go back again to the idea that in the 7th year that we don't work, that we let the land rest. And we have a triple 3-year production to enjoy. Is being with God completely. Like we don't need to work every day because we have enough food for 3 years. To be 1 year with God. Then we dedicate ourselves completely and fully to God. And then we learn, we experience that dimension that we don't know what that is. We don't. Until we get there. But the references, we know that the reference is the goodness. So we spend Shabbat day in goodness, being happy, rejoicing in the goodness that God gave us. And then the same thing the 7th year. We enjoy the goodness with Him. And then we enter this dimension in which we really don't know. From the material consciousness that we have no idea what that is. We don't. The only thing that we know is that we are with God. And then God will reveal His works to us. And then we will know. And again, when we're talking about the 50th year, the Yovel, the Jubilee, we're talking about something even greater than that. No, we really don't have imagination of conception about what that is. I have no idea. It's deeper. And then we will get there at some point. Our prophets called that the Messianic consciousness, the Messianic era. That we're going to have an eternal Shabbat. That we will understand. When we get there, it's like, oh, now we understand what this is. But at the meantime, the references that we have said from the beginning of this video is to have goodness as the reference that we have to live by, for, towards, every moment. That's the way we manifest God's presence in our consciousness and in our immediate material surroundings. That's the whole point. In the mountain, in the mount, with God. Okay, so we leave it here. I hope that we have a wonderful week of reflections, thoughts, now that we are counting the Omer before Shavuot. Let's reflect about this consciousness that God gave us in order to be with Him permanently. That's our ancestral heritage, by the way. That's Israel's legacy, inheritance. And again, let's clear our consciousness from that we don't need. That which is opposite to love's ways and attributes. So let's clear our consciousness of ego's fantasies and illusions and start focusing on what really matters, which is the ways, means, and attributes of love as the material manifestation of God's love. Okay, so we wish you an amazing, insightful, restful, wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. And until next week.